Please welcome Justin Hemes.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. God, I'm impressed.
I could actually see your face. When I called the Australian owner of this place the guest, he's like, did the Irish guy just call me a guest? My own bar, my own country? Yes, I did. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's a pleasure to have you. Let's start from the start. Where did it all begin?
Which bit?
Tell me about, you told me a great story yesterday, and it fits in perfectly with this idea of never settle. This guy wasn't going to settle before he even knew what he wasn't going to settle at. So maybe the story that your dad likes to tell you is a very cool story.
So growing up at school, I was rather conscientious at school, and I really enjoyed studying. And I actually met this guy on the harbour when I was about 13, and he was quite a bit older than me, and he was a very adventurous young guy, and sort of took me under his wing, and we used to go on a lot of adventures on the weekends, and we had a lot of fun. I think that started my passion for adventure and for life, and people always ask you what do you want to do when you grow up? I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I was living day by day and really enjoying it. But my father has this story which he loves telling his friends, and he was very proud telling me as well. He said he asked me when I was about 7 what I wanted to do in life. And I said, I want to join the business. I had no idea what the business was. And he said, well, what do you want to do in the business? I said, I'm just going to make it better, Dad. And my dad thought that was the greatest thing he's ever heard. So he told me that for the rest of my life.
And you did.
I don't know about that.
So
he did a very good job.
Skipping on a couple of years then, you joined the business probably about, in and around 15 years later than that.
Yes.
And you were about 22, you got into it, and that started off with the CBD building site, right?
Yes.
There you go. Can you give us a bit of colour on that? That was an interesting start.
Well, after I went to university after school, and again, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and so I did a Bachelor of Business, because that's what you did when you had no idea what you wanted to do. And I had a fantastic time at university, and I met some wonderful people, and I was working part-time at, Mum and Dad had a cafe and a bistro in Macleay Street, Potts Point, and so I worked there as a barista and a waiter, and I really enjoyed the social interaction with the guests. And my father was a fantastic salesman, and my mother has incredible talent, very creative, a wonderful eye, and foresight. And I used to come home from, actually, I was only 16 when I was working at the cafe, and I used to come home, and I wasn't good enough to be a waiter in the bistro, and I was too tall as well. You know at that time.
Horrible.
And I'd come home, and Dad said to me, "So what was your average today, Just?" I said, "What's he talking about?" I said, "Well, I don't know what you mean." He goes, "Well, how much did you sell?" I said, "I've got no idea." He said, "Well, I want you to tell me what your average is for your shift tomorrow." So I came home the next day. I said, "At $9.50. He said, "Okay, how are you going to make it $11 tomorrow?" I was like, "Oh shit, I don't know." I thought, "Oh," he said, "I want you to go away, think about it. I want it to come back. I want it to be $11 tomorrow." And I thought, what am I going to do? And we were serving breakfast, and we had this. Well, it was quite ingenious in those days. Freshly squeezed orange juice. And it was a revelation, freshly squeezed orange juice. No one was doing it. It's like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I thought, because when you sit someone down, you go and get the menus, and then they think about what they want to have. So before they sit down, or as they're sitting down, I say, "We've got some freshly squeezed orange juice today. The chef's been squeezing it this morning. Would you like a glass?" And that was $2.50. So before I even got their menus, I was already up $2.50. So the next day I was up to $12, and I was very proud of myself. They said, "Okay, well, how are you going to make it 14 tomorrow?" So I'm not going to do this again. So then, jumping forward, I went to university, and after uni, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And Dad put me in, Mum and Dad were in fashion, Dad put me in the office, and I was reconciling the credit cards, which is the most boring job I've ever done in my life. And because the head office was a 5-day operation, but Dad thought it was necessary for me to be in the office 7 days. So Saturday and Sunday I was in the office on my own. And I wasn't enjoying that. And my friends are ringing me, where are you? We're out, we're out swimming, or we're out doing this. And I had a little teenage tanty, and I had a fight, falling out with my dad, and I ran away from home. I went 300 metres down the road to my friend's house and slept on his couch, but I didn't tell Dad that. So I had this terrible falling out with my father over this, and it went on for a little bit. And then I thought, I came to this roadblock in my life, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to work in the office anymore, and I was struggling with my relationship on a business level with my dad. And I said, I don't know what I want to do. He said, well, I just want you to come back and live at home. He said, I can't stand you not being at the house, so I don't care what you want to do. He said, I just want you to be living at home with us. And I said, well, and at that stage, this was in 1993, my father had bought a building in the city on the corner of King and York, and it was an old Maxell bookshop, and it had some rundown offices above, and because my father loved property. And at that stage, I had no passion for property at all. In fact, I had no passion for anything. But I didn't have a passion for property like my father had. And he wanted to renovate this building and then lease it out. And I thought, well, I'll go and work for the builder, because I'm still working for the family. Indirectly, I'm working for the builder. I don't have to answer to my dad. I said, I'll go and work for the builder for a couple of weeks, work out what I want to do, and then we'll go from there. Well, that 2 weeks or 4 weeks turned into 2 years, and I fell in love with construction, and I fell in love with property, and I fell in love with the building, and I learnt what goes into the finishes on a wall, on the flooring, what holds the ceiling up, what holds the roof up, the electricals, the plumbing. I did all trades because I was a brickage labourer, so you have to help with everything. And I just fell in love with construction. And then at the end of the construction, mind you, sorry, I'll step back. So this site, Dad didn't know what to turn it into. And again, I was going out in those days. I just started going out. And I realised there was a hole in the market, because in 93, if you wanted to go and have a drink, you'd go to the pub. And the pub was a male-dominated environment, and it had shitty top 40 music, and it had beer-smelling carpets, and it was blokes standing around grunting and ogling at the one girl petrified in the corner. and
Stop, you're making me homesick.
Yeah. Very good. And then, and if you wanted a good meal, you'd have to leave the pub and go to a nice restaurant. And then if you wanted to go dancing, you had to go to a separate nightclub. And if you wanted to have cocktails, you'd have to go to a different venue again. So I thought, why can't we have all of this in one building? Why do we have to leave? And why can't the pub, the area where you go and have your beer, have great music and female-friendly? So we came up with this concept for this building. It was a multi-level building on a corner. I thought this would be a great site to house all these different offerings in the one building. So we actually conceptualised the building, and my mum designed it, and I worked on the construction site for 2 years. And the tenant that we had to run it thankfully pulled out because he thought it was too ambitious. So we were left with a building that we built and designed and conceptualised in our idea, but no one to run it. So towards the end of the construction, I left with my best mate at the time, who I'd met on the construction site, who I'd worked with for 2 years, and we went backpacking around Australia. And about a month into the trip, I got a call from my dad and said, we can't even get someone to manage it. Can you come back and run this place for us? And I was in Darwin at the time. I said, I'll come back straight away. So I drove from Darwin to Sydney in 2 days. I stopped a couple of hours for a little sleep, and And I arrived back, and I remember it was a Friday night. And I drove in down York Street, and this place I'd worked on for 2 years, drove down York Street, and I saw all these crowds on the street. It's like, what's that? Anyway, the place was so busy. They were bellowing out onto the streets. So I parked the car in the city there, and I ran in and I started managing. And then I fell in love with hospitality. So it was the combination of construction and hospitality that's led me into this direction.
And then you were a little bit bold in dealing with how busy that place was, I believe.
Yes.
And took business outside the four walls, to put it mildly.
Yes. Well, it was so well received. It's a hotel CBD. We still have it. So we opened in '95, and it was so well received that, I mean, we had 5 levels. Ground level was the public bar. First floor was a restaurant, and we had Luke Mangan was our chef. And then level 2 was a pool hall, but I had a DJ in there, and I had the Sega Rally things and a cocktail bar. And then the level above that was a more sophisticated cocktail bar. And we had Maggie Tabra's daughter, Brooke Tabra, hosting it. We had a grand piano there, and she would sing, and we made great cocktails. And then above that was the nightclub. And my sister lived on the floor above that in an apartment. She lasted 2 nights. The music was so full on, and the sound system I put in was so big that her bed actually moved across the floor. And she tells me the story, she packed her bags, and it took her half an hour to get out of the building because it was so busy in the building she couldn't get out. Anyway, it was so busy that we had people all in the streets, and I put bollards out, and I took over one of the lanes of York Street and one of the lanes of King Street and filled that with people too. And then we got complaints because people had to cross the road to get across, and then the cars couldn't get through, so it was a real problem. So police came, so I had to bring the bollards back and squash the people in a bit. And it was so busy, so I thought, oh, I made these little bars on wheels, and I put them out on the street, and I was selling beer and wine, bottles of wine, on the street. And the police came and said, you can't do that. I said, why not? Everyone's loving it. Look how happy everyone is. This is totally illegal. Oh, shit. I said, what's illegal about it? They said, you can't sell alcohol on the street from a bar. And I said, but it's all right for them to bring it out, isn't it? He said, yes. So I wheeled the bars inside, and I cut the windows out and popped the windows, and I sold out the windows. So it was a huge success. And Mikey, who had been backpacking with me and had worked on the construction site, he was homeless at the time. His parents had kicked him out of home, and nothing to do with me. And he didn't have a home, and my dad had these 4 little terraces on Sussex Street, just down the way from CBD. And I asked Dad if I could set Mikey up in this place for him to live there. And Dad said, yes, not a problem, because he'd had these little places on the market, trying to lease them out for 5 years, and we couldn't get a tenant because that part of the city down on Sussex Street was dead. In fact, King and York Street was dead, and King Street was dead, but this was really dead. So I set Mikey up down there, and he did a really nice job, and there was no electricity or anything, and he put candles out, and we had this outdoor courtyard. And we used to go down after work, so we finish up about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and all the staff would go down to Mikey's for drinks by candlelight. And a lot of the staff in those days were backpackers, and all the barbacks were backpackers. And they were down there, they're going, oh my God, this is amazing down here, it's so beautiful. And I said, is this nicer than your hostels that you live in? They said, so much better. And I said, so you would pay to sleep here? They said, yes. So the next day I went and bought 60 double bunks from Freedom. They were the flat pack ones. So we put them together. And I remember the mattresses had those awful multicoloured covers on them. Anyway, so within a week, I had the place, these little terraces, 120 backpackers paying me $15 cash a night. I couldn't believe it. I thought, this is fantastic. So I thought, oh, this is a good business, this backpacking business. So I rang my dad and I said, oh, I've got a little business going on. And I've got an idea. And he said, oh, let's have lunch at CBD. So we had lunch at CBD, and I said, oh, I'm doing this. And I always used to do everything on a little piece of paper. and an Excel spreadsheet and scribbles. And I said, look, this is what I'm doing. This is what's happening. And I said, I think I can make this beautiful hostel down there, but I need to buy the building next door. And the building next door had been for sale for 5 years, and they couldn't sell it. He says, I know who owns that building. It's Montepaschi Bank, and their offices are next door to where we were having lunch. So we finished lunch, went next door, went up to their offices, and all the directors were there. Montepaschi is an Italian bank. It's the oldest bank in the world, actually. And coincidentally, all the directors were in the room, in the office at the time. I don't know what they were doing, because I only had one outlet here. And we bought the building for nothing, there and then.
Maybe that's why we haven't heard of Montepaschi Bank since.
And then I went ahead and wanted to build this hostel between the two buildings, the terraces and this building next door. And I had even bigger plans because it was a much bigger floor plate than CBD. CBD was still going great guns. So we used the cash from that to buy the building next door. Yeah. And then I wanted to develop that building into a hostel, and I put all my plans in. Now, in those days, I drew the plans myself. So you didn't have to have architects and all this. I just sketched on a piece of paper, and you give that to council. And they sign that off. So I couldn't believe all this stuff. It's like crayons. Beer. Because I thought, because my concept was, I'll build this hostel, and I'll have all these Swedish backpackers staying there. And for them to go and shower, I was going to build the showers in the basement, and they had to walk down through the courtyard. And the courtyard I was going to make a bar out of it. So I thought all the suits would be in the courtyard, watching the Swedish backpackers go down in their robes. I thought, this is ingenious. So anyway, I hit all these roadblocks in council, and they're making all these requirements for me to do these particular disabled lifts. But it was a heritage building. They said, but you're not allowed to touch the fabric of the building. You can't cut a hole in the floor, but you've got to put a lift in. I said, well, how do you do that? Unless you're Houdini, it's not going to work. So I said, this doesn't make sense. I physically can't do it. They said, we don't want a hostel in that part of the town. That's why this is happening. I went, okay. Why didn't you tell me before? And I said, well, what do you want? They said, we'd rather it be a pub. So it was going to be called Sleep In, and then I changed it to Slip In because the back street was slip. So then we launched Slip In. And then that was, well, initially when we opened, it wasn't successful. I opened the doors, and I remember my dad's friends and all the other people in the industry saying, your son's going to send you bankrupt. You know, CBD's fantastic, but in all due respect, nothing's going to work down in Sussex Street down there. And, you know, you're investing, you know, your wealth in your son, and it's not going to work. So I was hearing all this, and I opened the doors. Well, it was empty, not a soul. And it was 2 weeks in, and it was a Friday night, and there was maybe 10 people in the building, and I was so depressed. And I remember I rang my dad, and he was at home, and I said, Dad, I said, it's dead. I said, maybe they were right. And he, bullshit. He goes, do you believe it's going to be good? I said, yes, of course I do. I think it's fantastic. Don't worry, it'll be busy. And then the next week, there were queues 100 metres down the road. It was just it was word of mouth. And a few people it was actually Fairfax, because their offices were down the way. A few people from Fairfax came, word got out, and then it was packed. Yeah. And then it just flowed from there.
The one trait that really, well, there's two of them.
Sorry, did I answer the question?
No, you did. I'll pretend I remember what the question was. There's two traits.
I have no idea what the question was. That's why I'm asking.
No, we both agreed that we're not great planners, so we thought we'd just kind of make it natural. Two traits that are pretty evident there. One is the resourcefulness. So, I mean, you see this space, you talk to a couple of backpackers, you put A and B together and say, light bulb, we could put a hostel there. Second is vision, and I guess that kind of lines up. But vision then carried you into the next chapter of your career, where you went from kind of small pubs, or not that the CBD is in any way small, but kind of startup pubs to big projects, big scary projects like Ivy and Establishment. How did that transition happen? Where did the daring come from there?
Well, I mean, I had two under my belt at this stage, and I just thought that was the norm. So I guess ignorance is bliss, you know, we grew up. My sister and I grew up in a really amazing environment. You know, our parents were so colourful and loved life, and you know, that to us was normal. And then we started travelling overseas in the late 90s. Well, sorry, mid to late 90s, around 96. And we were going to some really fabulous places. We went to Turkey and a lot of the places that really weren't on the map. And travelling in those days was a real luxury. You know, not nowadays everyone can travel everywhere. It was a real luxury. And it was the first time I started experiencing the rest of the world. We went to New York and London, and then really unusual places like Turkey. And I was like, I got so inspired by what those places had to offer and the level of opulence and the excitement of the interaction with people and how they experience food and beverage. And off the back of the success of CBD and Slip, and mind you, Slip In, I did on an absolute shoestring budget. It was really any excess cash that was left over from CBD after paying our debts and our interest and everything. I used that to build Slip. So it was done on a shoestring budget. And I thought, okay, I think Sydney's ready for the next evolution of hospitality, and it was really what I was seeing overseas. And I thought, I want to bring some of that to Sydney. And I wanted to build something and have a really good budget to do a fabulous fit out. And again, the multi-level, multi-facet, interactive facility, but done, you know, with some money.
So
you
that
know,
was
with a
the
good
vision.
budget.
You wanted to spark a sort of evolution of nightlife in Sydney.
Yeah, and it wasn't just nightlife. It was you know, obviously day and lunch,
Yeah.
but it was a place where international guests would come and feel comfortable in as well, and a new style of a new level of experience of hospitality for the locals. So I had this vision to create this mini city of hospitality, as I thought of it in my head. And also to introduce accommodation, because again, when we did travel, although we went to these amazing cities, I just felt all the hotel rooms were just so repetitious, and I couldn't tell the difference between the hotel in New York, the room in New York to London, or they were just the same. They were these soulless boxes. So I wanted to create accommodation that felt more personal, more like a mini little apartment or studio apartment. And I wanted to mix all those things together. And then Hemisphere came about because of our experience in Turkey and the richness of colours. And Est came about from the different dining experiences that we had in London, where there was that level of opulence and sophistication, but you didn't feel like you had to whisper when you're eating and wear white gloves while you're eating your food. So, and then the bar on the ground level came from going to New York and seeing what a beautiful grand room could feel like, full of people, you know, chatting and drinking and having a great time. So I thought, let's do something with a bigger budget.
What was that room before? This is the bottom of the establishment where I hear...
Oh, that was Tank nightclub.
That was a nightclub before.
Mr. Wong's?
No, I'm talking about the ground floor of the establishment.
Oh, what was it?
Where I hear the salsa dancing is on a Tuesday.
Yes, I see you on the cameras every Tuesday.
What was that room before? Because it's full of pillars and it doesn't look like a typical...
It was a burnt out ruin. So the whole building burnt down to the ground in 1996.
Right.
96. We call it a fire sale here.
So
the building, it was a burnt out shell. It used to be it was actually the Bulletin,
okay.
Bulletin magazine
Yeah.
in the 30s. And then it was George Patterson Advertising Agency. And then it was bought for a high-rise development. It got knocked back in council, and the developers had an option over the site, but their DA got knocked back, and then 2 fires started simultaneously at opposite ends of the building.
What?
Coincidence.
Not suspicious at all,
yeah? Anyway, the developers, it's a long story, they lost their battle. and the receivers called it, and it was for sale. And I bought this burnt out shell. And I remember the first time I took my mum and my sister to see it. And I said, I've got this great idea. You won't believe it. I'm going to do this and this and this. And they were like, oh, sounds fantastic. And there was a hoarding on George Street. And you walk through the hoarding, and behind it was a charred shell. I mean, you walked in off Ground George Street, and you looked up, you saw the sky. There was nothing above it. And prior to them coming, I'd gone through the back end of the building, which had a couple of floors there because it was a different building. It didn't burn out as much. And on the top level, there's a water tower. And in the water tower, I walked in, and there was all these mattresses, and there were needles, injecting needles, and blankets and that. So there were squatters in there, but no one was in the room. But hanging on the wall was this crowbar. Now, this is in 98, so I was 26. So I took the crowbar off the wall, and I went back down. Then I met my mum and my sister, and I brought them up, and we went. There was a little decayed fire stair, and it took us up to the first floor. Now, the first floor, the only bit surviving of the first floor was was the perimeter of the wall, and only about 4 meters wide. It was like a U shape. So we were standing up on this burnt out, decayed floor with all charcoal around us. And you could see 40 metres across to the other building where the water tower was. And I remember it was early in the morning because the sun was coming up from the east. And it was only early, so they had a sharp angle on the sun. And there was this guy standing across and next to the water tower. And there was no building behind him, it was just sky. And it was like something out of, what's that movie, Cape Fear. And this guy's standing up there in his underpants, covered from head to toe in tattoo. Where's my crowbar? And I'm like, what? And he's like, where's my effing crowbar? And I'm looking at him, it's like, I don't know what you're talking about, mate. I don't think my voice had broken yet. Anyway, I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And Teen's saying, what's he doing? Who's this guy? And he goes, I'm coming to get it. So he disappears and goes down the stairs in the back building, and you see him walking across underneath us. So we're now looking down, looking at this guy coming in his underpants at 9 a.m. covered to head to toe in tattoos. I want my bloody crowbar. And anyway, I picked the crowbar up. Teen says, you've got the crowbar! And I said, yes, he's not getting it. Anyway, so he came up, and the fire stair there was no door, it was just a hole in the wall of the fire stair. And my sister tells the story that she was standing behind me, and I've got the crowbar, and this guy's come up, and he's about to come through the hole. And I'm there, and Teen's standing behind me, and all she can see is my leg going like this, because I was so nervous. And I'm like, you're not coming through, mate! I've got my parents here, I'll kill you first! Got my legs going, because of the adrenaline. Anyway, he never came through, thank God. I don't know what I would have done. Anyway, he never came through. We called the police. The police said, you can't get rid of them because they're squatters.
Right.
So we had to get our security from CBD to remove them. But it was a burnt out shell.
And you didn't consider a career in security after that one? No. Fair enough.
So it was a burnt out shell. So it was just this vision, and it suited it because I felt like it was this ruin in the heart of the city that we could bring back to life.
Yeah. Well, that's something I'm fascinated by that you've spoken about before, that you walk into a place and it is, not that this place needs fixing, it is as it is, and then you just kind of see what it could be. That doesn't even exist, but you see it clearly. And you walk into some places, you see that, and you go, I want the place, I'm going to do it straight away. Or you don't see anything, you go, no, not for me. Could you talk about how that process works? Because while most people probably won't be able to relate to it, it is a fascinating insight into how an artist's mind works.
Well, with any venue, it happens, there's a number of ways that it happens. So it's either we have a particular talent in the company, or outside that's about to come into the company, and I want to build a business around them. Or there's an idea that I have in my head, which I want to execute in a particular area or suburb, and then we'll go looking for the right building. Or it's an opportunity where a building is for sale, and I'll go and see the building and then see what I could do with it. And that goes to your question. When I walk into a building, I can immediately see what the concept could be, and I actually see the people moving around in the site, having a drink, eating and socialising, and I can see that immediately. And if I don't see it, I guess it's like a writer's block, then the building's not for me.
Yeah. And is it a case that that vision then has to be met regardless, not regardless, but almost regardless of costs, and that's how you end up racking up huge projects
Huge bills.
It's not like Establishment and Ivy are enormous projects. You said yourself yesterday, you didn't know what that even meant, you said. But the vision required it. And so are you under this pressure internally?
I think it goes back to blind faith. I mean, those projects, Establishment, back then, you know, we didn't have the money to spend on this concept that I had, and we had to go cap in hand to the banks. And you know, our bank that my father had been with for 25 years, they said, "There's no way."
Really?
Not interested at all. You know, I ended up spending $45 million, which was unheard of for a pub in those days. It was unheard of. But I didn't really grasp what that meant, because at the end of the day, it just had to stack up financially. And I knew what each area would deliver, would return, just from my experience in the trade at CBD and Slip. So it just came down to numbers. So it just made sense to me. But I think in hindsight now, knowing, if I knew then what I know now, I certainly would have thought twice about it. But in those days, it was almost ignorance, but blind faith in myself. And my father was like, "Oh, if you think it's going to work, it's going to work. Don't worry, don't worry." So I guess it was this level of confidence and determination that it had to work. There was no choice that it couldn't work.
Yeah.
But again, the bank said no. Every bank we went to said no, not interested, not interested. And would you believe it? A friend of a friend of my dad was a manager, a bank manager at an outlet in Burwood, and he had a connection with some people, some top people at CBA, so I got a voice with them. And it was just through that person and that connection that I got to sit down in front of those people, and they believed in my vision. No one else did, because all the other banks, they said, "Well, we've got to get a valuer to check it out, and a forecaster." And the forecaster said, "This is the most ridiculous idea. It's never going to work, because there's nothing to base it on, and there just isn't the population in Sydney to deliver that." But these people had faith in me. I went there with my Excel spreadsheet, and they believed in me. So CBA gave me my big start, and they financed Establishment. And then off the back of that, it was certainly easier to get financed after that.
What's it like going into a room full of bankers who've been doing this for years and have a set way of thinking, and you're sharing with them your vision, which is somewhat baseless? I mean, you're talking to yourself about the idea of blind faith and knowing that this is going to work without actually anything. Well, you had a few numbers backing it up, but this vision was so bold that they had no real reason to believe it would work. What's it like going into a bunch of these guys and saying, "This is my vision, laugh if you will, but I'm going to make it happen"? Is that a daunting experience, an energizing experience?
Well, the first experience was with my dad's bank, which was the State Bank.
Right.
And it was one of the most awful experiences I've ever gone through. Well, I was only 25, so I hadn't been through many experiences. But it was an awful experience, because we went up to their office, and their office was up on the 40th floor. I'd never been up 40 floors in a building. And we went into their meeting room, and it was this huge table. I remember it was like the longest table I'd ever seen. And there were 6 of them sitting on one side, and it was myself and my dad and Angela, who's here, is my PA, then EA, and now right-hand person. She's here, but she was at that meeting. And it was so demoralising. And the way they spoke down to us, and they spoke down to my dad, and they said my idea was ridiculous, and I was so demoralised. I felt so sick, and I walked out. I thought, I never, ever want to be in that position again in my life. And I was so fortunate of this connection that when I met these people from CBA, I mean, the numbers didn't stack up because there was nothing to compare it to, but they saw something and they believed in it.
Yeah.
And I was so lucky that I had that interaction, because if we didn't meet those people, I probably never would have got the funding.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you do something that is brazen or out of the ordinary, or, you know, there's nothing to compare it to, it really, you've got to rely on that person, the person that's funding it, believing in you.
Yeah.
And believing in the person, that person will deliver what they say they're going to.
I was thinking that.
Because there's one thing to have the idea, but then you actually have to deliver it.
Yeah.
So I guess they had faith in me, thank God.
So I was thinking that you go in and you're almost saying, not directly, but you're saying, you don't have to believe in this. I believe in it so much that all you need to do is believe in me.
Yeah.
And
that's
with
what
that,
it was.
we're going to pull it off. So you make these big, risky moves. It's worked very well. Ivy was an enormous project. It worked a treat. Establishment, the same thing. And here you are now today, sitting atop an empire that spanned 65. You know,
Well,
very successful.
this one,
menus.
I actually didn't build this one.
Didn't build which
this one.
Oh, did you not?
No,
Well,
so this is an anomaly. So when I opened Ivy, I just opened, and it was a huge risk. I mean, Ivy was the riskiest of them all,
Yeah.
because it was a delayed project. I had a lot of problems getting it through council, and I had a huge investment, and you know, as it was 3 times establishment, and it was a huge holding cost, and through some very unfortunate timings and a dissolving of the council a day before my approval, the council went into limbo for, I think, 8 months, and then they elected a new council, and I had to start from scratch. Anyway, I lost approximately 2 to 3 years in getting the approval, which really strained the business financially, and it was touch and go. And again, it was a moment. It was one moment in my life when I was about to give up. And again, I told my dad, I said, this is putting too much strain on the business financially. I'm really nervous about this. And again, the same thing. Do you believe it's going to work? He said. And I said, yes, Dad, I think it's going to be fantastic. He goes, well, just got to push through. So that was a bit of a breaking point for me, and he pushed me through that. But cutting back. So we just opened, and it was a big hoo-ha about it. We were busy, and it was going well. And then this other guy, and I'd never actually compare myself to other people, because I'm so busy and I'm so engrossed in what we do that I'm such a perfectionist. I just want everything we do to be perfect. So I don't actually ever compare myself or big note myself to someone else. But this guy was going around saying he's going to do something so much better than Ivy. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be, Ivy's going to shut down. There'll be no one because they'll all be coming to my place. And I was like, oh, you dickhead. Anyway.
The same guy with the crowbar, right?
Yes, he was still in his undies. And it annoyed me because the media actually got behind it and was sort of supporting him at the time, and it upset me. Anyway, cut a long story short, he opened a couple of 6 months or 8 months later, and then about a year and a half after that, I ended up buying it at auction off the receivers,
Right.
which was this building. He never actually finished it. He spent so much on it, and they opened downstairs and they couldn't survive, and they never finished this level, which we did. But it went into receivership. Yeah. So I took great joy in buying it at auction. I know I shouldn't say that, but it was...
He who laughs last.
Yes.
I walked away from yesterday with 2 other big things in mind. One was the idea of kind of warm-hearted business. I've made that term up myself. A lot of people perceive like success in business to be, or like a prerequisite for success in business to be kind of like the ability to shut off emotion, kind of cold-heartedness, all this like almost facelessness, where you just deal with the numbers and push it through. You seem to have an incredibly warm heart when dealing and talking about your business. Do you think that's fair? Like it's love-driven as opposed to...
Well, it's passion.
Yeah, it's very much a passion.
Mm.
What's your take on warm business as opposed to cold business, if you get those terms?
Well, I mean, I think the job that we do and the business that we're in is the greatest business on earth, because, I tell the staff, our job, people are coming to us to have a good time. All we have to do is help them. Yeah. And my job is, our motto is life less ordinary, less ordinary. So I feel I'm charged with the job of creating experiences, or venues and experiences to improve people's social lives and make them feel better about life.
Yeah.
And I get to create these venues out of my imagination and create them for people who come in, and I get to stand back and watch them interact in the venues, and I feel that, you know, I've made their day better for that. And that's the most rewarding thing, and that's what excites me and charges me to go to the next one and keep pushing ourselves and trying to raise the bar and create a greater diversity of offerings. I mean, Kate, my partner's here, and our little three-week-old daughter, and we were down at the Swiss Grand in Coogee the day after the birth, and I went and got pizza for us down at Coogee Pavilion. It was a Saturday night, and I walked in there as a guest, and I ordered the pizza, and I stood waiting, and I stood around, and you know, it was only 4 years prior that I walked into that place, which was the most filthy, disgusting place I'd ever been. And to see the amount of people in there and all walks of life interacting in such a beautiful way, enjoying their food, people, you know, single people having a meal downstairs, ready to go upstairs to try and meet the, you know, someone, the love of their life or the love for that night, and you know, 3 generations of families here and kids running around playing ping pong and the staff so engaged and loving their job. And I thought, wow. And the adrenaline was pumping through me. And I thought, this is fantastic. And that so excites me and charges me, and to do another place and keep growing and keep delivering, because that's what we love doing. So it's such a fabulous job. How can you not be excited and passionate and warm about it?
Yeah. And I guess that's a smooth segue into the second thing that was in my mind as I walked away yesterday, because I said at the start the 3 things that I was thinking to myself as we chatted, and then walking away. The big thing was, like, what was it about that guy? And I thought about it. I was thinking about it most of the evening, and then I figured it out. And I describe it as, I think, probably the biggest accomplishment that one can achieve. I think I gathered from yesterday that you have managed to get to a point where every aspect of your life is a channel through which you can express passion and love. So and you know, from an outsider's perspective, it looked like you have the family, the business, and the outdoors is clearly a big passion of yours as well. Seems like you're spending most of your time attending to one of those 3 things.
Yes.
And for each of the blocks of your life to be a channel through which you express passion and love, that's an incredible thing to achieve. It's more a comment than a question, but if you have any comments of your own about that, it'd be interesting to hear.
Maybe.
I don't mean to embarrass you.
I think Kate might think sometimes I have too much passion for life. Calm down. Thank you. I don't know what to say, but thank you.
Well, I think it just seems like a great thing to be able to achieve, and something that most people who are in pursuit of more free expression of their passions would bear in mind as being the ultimate goal, or something that they strive towards.
Right, it just comes naturally. I mean, I love life.
Yeah.
I love everything that life has to offer. I love my job. I love my family, and I love outdoors, and I love Sydney. So it just comes naturally.
A lot going on. A lot going on means a lot to lose. Does that mean?
I've never thought about that.
I've got some news for you. No, a lot to lose. Are you becoming less risk averse now because you know?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I took some ridiculous risks, and again, as I said before, if I knew then what I know now, I perhaps may not have taken those risks. But I took those risks. We got through it. I didn't think there was any other way but to get through it. But I wouldn't take the extent of those risks now, because I've got a family, and I think, you know, I've achieved enough that the business is in such a stable, strong position. It's a fantastic footing for growth, but I never have to take that amount of relative risk again.
Okay.
And I'm not a gambling man, so I don't need to gamble.
Yeah.
Everything I've worked for my staff, my family, and everything we've achieved, to throw it away. So I will still take risks, but they'll be calculated and relatively less.
Yeah, fair enough. I think in the interest of time, we're going to begin to wrap up, but I end every podcast the same way, and I try to end these things. It's a couple of quick fire questions. Why did you get out of bed 25 years ago? What was the factor for you then, the driving factor?
I think it was my dad's foot on my back.
Okay, why do you get out of bed now?
Well, now it's to get my eldest daughter out of bed and make her a fluffy and an egg, because it's her favourite thing. But I'm so excited about what we do, what we're doing at work. I've got some amazing projects on the go. I've got an incredible team behind me, better than ever before. And that excites me, engaging with them to create these new venues and new concepts and new ideas. That gets me up. My day is full of creativity.
Yeah.
You know, and dealing with problems as well. There's a lot of that. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to sugarcoat it. There's more problems than ever that you have to deal with. The larger the business gets, but I see them as a challenge as well. And I find it's almost exciting, because I want to turn those problems into an advantage. And I think that's what sets you apart from the rest. And on the weekends, I love getting up and, well, every day I have the fluffy. To me is exciting. I love perfecting the fluffy in the morning is amazing. So everything excites me, and that's why I get up.
Yeah, very good. Who have you met that inspires you?
You. I think you've done a marvellous job.
Interviewing someone who didn't hear my questions.
Again. Certainly Richard Branson. Incredible character. I've met so many fantastic people. As a kid, looking up and seeing what Richard Branson had achieved, and his whole philosophy of, never take no for an answer, and you defy sort of status quo, or you challenge status quo. What an amazing success story, and what an incredible man.
You were saying that you were trying to replicate his head of hair as well, upstairs. So that's someone you've met. Who have you not met? Is it someone you've read about, or that these guys can go and read about and glean a bit of inspiration from or energy from? I mean, you've been lucky to meet a lot of amazing people, of course.
Someone that I haven't met?
Haven't met, just read about or heard about or anything like that.
Well, I'd like to meet Donald Trump, but for very different reasons.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. And any last one, any inspirational quote that has always driven you or stuck in your mind, or that you'd like to make up right now for these
my
people?
father always used to say, if you're going to do it well. That was his sort of thing, and that resonates, across, certainly with me, and that resonates with our staff, and it's really what we're about. But it's not just do it well, be excellent at it, and it's that driving force to not accept good, but best.
Yeah.
Best in class, and that's what we do. I don't benchmark ourselves against anyone else, and I don't compare ourselves to anyone else, and certainly not through arrogance, but more through. Certainly not through arrogance.
I wish that was a more shocking statement. Where it's like,
Was that done on purpose? That was someone going, let's see if this bothers him.
I think she works for one of the rival companies.
What are we talking about? It's about everything that I do and that we do as a group, and my sister and I. It's about doing it as good as we possibly can. So whether it's a finish or a style of food or a kitchen or whatever it may be, it's got to be the best. And I think that's what we set our own benchmark against ourselves.
Yeah. Well, that clearly resonated with someone. Well, Justin Hemmes, thank you so much for your time. I think we're going to open it up to the floor, but firstly, thank you for that brilliant chat. Thank you.
Justin, thank you for buying this pub because my partner and I live opposite and we call it our courtyard. so it's the extension of our living room.
Well, thank you.
You've been a huge part of shaping Sydney culture, whether that's nightlife or the way that contemporary Australians socialise. And we owe a lot of that to you. What is, in cultural terms, what's your next vision? What's the next chapter that we're moving into, do you think?
I actually think you are the ones that are shaping the culture of this city, because I just create the platform for you guys to use. So it's almost a canvas for you guys to work on. So I think the beauty of this city, and we are Sydney-centric, the beauty of this city is that the diversity of offerings and the level of enthusiasm of the guests to try new things and try lots of things is really quite exceptional. And we have a diversity here that is quite unique compared to other countries around the world. I mean, we've got an incredible Asian influence here. We've got an American influence, Italian and French. We've got so many influences here, which is quite unique, because if you go to Italy, for instance, you're not going to get good Chinese, and we have Turkish here. And we're very keen and eager Australians love life, and we get a lot out of it, so we like to experience new things. So really, I'm just growing with the enthusiasm of the population. But lots of really good things coming up.
We talk about Sydney as being an international city, and yet, having travelled a bit myself and being a keen music person, the battle here is that we're joked about now in terms of not having a vibrant music scene and being overrun by bureaucracy. Like, you can't open up a small bar or something, and you can't have people drink on the street unless you get 6 permits done. You've got to have a wheelchair access and 1 person for security plus 100 people, blah, blah, blah. How, from the hospitality angle, do we bring ourselves back up to the levels of, the respect?
Well, there's a couple of, good question, but there's a couple of elements there. In terms of live music, I've been trying to push live music all my life. In fact, we opened this venue as a live music venue, and we put on free entertainment, live music every Friday. We had 5-6 bands a night, and it was very hard to get the punters to come in. And then the bands would stop and the DJs would come on and it'd be packed. So it's actually has a lot to do with our culture around it. I couldn't believe it. We had live bands Friday night from 6 p.m. to 11, and it would be empty. And then as soon as the DJ came on, it was full. Then the other issue is a lot of bands charge a lot of money to play. Whereas if you're in America, these guys do it for exposure. So you have some really incredible bands playing for nothing because they want exposure and they want to get their name out there, etc. We don't have that culture here. So there's a bit of financial hurdle there. In terms of small bars, I think in terms of bars, we've come a long way. I think we're in a pretty good place. There are a lot of small bars now. They've certainly relaxed the laws of small bars. I think it's easier to get a small bar license than a pub license, that's for sure. The lockout laws, I mean, it's, for me, there's so many hurdles thrown at us from government, etc., and you just have to live with it and sort of get through it. It's certainly not ideal. They've relaxed the laws a little bit recently. Our Premier's extra half an hour and incentives around live music, which I think is a great step in the right direction. But you're right, on an international level, for them to come here and be told, well, after midnight, you can't have a shot of tequila, you can't have a scotch on the rocks, but you can have 13 bourbon and cokes if you want. And after 2 o'clock at night, sorry, you can't have a bottle of champagne. I mean, it's crazy. But it's there, and we deal with it and we adapt. And that will change over time. But I think holistically, we're in a much better place than we've ever been. 15 years ago, my God, the quality of experience going out was not 1/100th of what it is now in terms of the diversity and the sophistication.
I have two questions. So it's really interesting and funny listening to you actually, because a lot of the way that you speak isn't what I expected. Now, I don't know what I expected, but you bring people together with your venues, and you've got the couple at the back that live across the road. My fiance and I met at Slip In. So you've got all these venues that are amazing. And if you say Merivale, 99% of people in Sydney will know what you're talking about, will know one of your venues. You have so much success and so much vision. One, have you ever doubted yourself? And how have you overcome that? And two, what's with the racing suit?
Yes, good question. Have I Mystique? Have I doubted myself? Yes, there was the 2 times. The one when I opened Slip In, and it was the second weekend. It was a Friday night, and you know there was so much chatter in my dad's ear from his friends, and I actually thought maybe they were right. And but the biggest one was the Ivy development. You know, I bought a couple of properties, invested a lot of money in it, and that was a huge risk. And I was just getting knocked back and knocked back and knocked back at council. And it wasn't like, oh, you've got to change this or change. It was like, forget about it, forget about it. So it was such a knockback, and I had so much invested and so much at stake that I thought, oh, shit, I've done something wrong here. But it was my dad that got me through, and it was just him saying, do you believe it's going to be successful? And that's all he said. And I said, yes, I do. He said, well, you've got to keep pushing, keep going. So that was the biggest challenge for me mentally. I mean, this was over a 3-year period. It wasn't over one day. And so what was the other question?
The racing suit.
Oh. Well, Sophie said, well, we got the Hahn. She came into my office, she does our styling. She said, oh, I'm doing all the styling for the Hahn things. And, you know, we had the guy from Deus, so the mechanic from Deus. So we put all the mechanical parts up behind him. And we had a guy from a recycling business. So we had, she said, what do you want to put up? And I thought, oh, I have no idea. And I said, well, we can't put a picture of buildings up behind me. It would be ridiculous. So she said, well, what are your passions? And I said, well, I love everything. And she said, well, give me something to go with. I said, well, yeah, I love everything. I love this, I love racing. So I think it was around my passion to be the best at what I do, at that everything I put my hand to. And I'm so driven, and I have, you know, obsessive compulsive sort of behavior that I started racing a couple of years ago, and it wasn't like I just did it casually. I got so into it that I became so obsessed with it. And it's quite a technical sport. And it's an incredible team sport, actually, even though you're the only one in the car. You know, the guys that work on the car, the guys that give you the feedback on the radio, and there's a lot of tactics involved in racing. So I became so engrossed in it that you get an incredible amount of digital data from all the sensors in the cars. And I used to study the data. So when everyone else was going out or going to sleep, I would study the data for hours every night to try and find a way to improve my time by 1/100th of a second or 1/10th of a second. And I ended up winning the Australian Championship in my second year, which was quite unheard of. So I think that's why it's up there. But it's a lot skinnier than me. Well, probably not, actually. Okay,
What's a fluffy? Just a quick question. What's a fluffy?
I thought I was the only one who didn't know. It's like
Oh, it's like a baby
the
chino.
Irish guy.
A baby chino. So it's the froth off the milk. So when you froth the milk, and then she has chocolate on top.
I'm so glad you asked that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Justin, construction tick, hospitality tick. Some of the best nights of my entire life at your venues tick.
Fantastic.
What's next?
More of the same. More of the same. You know, my passion for property is an all-time high. My passion to create experiences that improve people's lives is at an all-time high. We've got the best, we're in the most stable and strong position we've ever been in. So we'll just be able to, in the last 5 years, we've diversified substantially into what our offerings are. We used to be very much city-focused, CBD-focused, and sort of, 20 to 45 focused. But now we're 1 week to 110. We have offerings for all walks of life, for all occasions, for all styles of moods that you're in, and that's really exciting for me. So I guess it's continuing to fill those gaps and desires and needs in the market. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, I think we have to leave it there, though I personally could keep asking questions all night. Justin, you've been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. And you guys have been an absolute pleasure as well. You've been really, really good, really engaged with the questions as well. Laughed at my jokes. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And you've been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. So please stick around, have a chat, and have a drink. Thank you.
Thank you.